we will have adjournment. Is there a motion to approve our
So
agenda?
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me, are there any changes or additions to our agenda? Seeing none and without objection, our agenda is approved. So we're going to go ahead and start our public comment on agenda items. We have 3 speakers this evening. You have 3 minutes to address the board. The first speaker is President Los Carson, here to talk about transportation staffing, action requested, understand and support the transition of our transportation department as we work on the new system. President Carson.
Good evening. Good evening, President Adair and Vice President Vera, and members of the board and interim superintendent, Dr. Chapman, and all CCS staff. This evening, I would like to talk with you about personnel of Transportation Department. It's been a rough school year in the Transportation Department. We have adjusted to new routes and other changes and taken it all in stride. We just ask that the board and staff and community try to continue to support the team and understand that our transportation job is not a 9-to-5 job. We operate under a lot of different circumstances, such as delays with weathers, accidents, parents and administrators holding us up at the bus stop, and a simple street closure can make our routes late. But sometimes the world doesn't understand that, and it's all that driver's late again, that driver's late again. There's reasons why most drivers are late. It's not because we purposely do it. One thing we know, we didn't have enough drivers at the beginning of the school year. And we've worked that out with some new routes, but we need additional drivers. Most media coverage talks about the late buses or the bad pickup spots or just negative. I would love to some night cut the news on and hear about the successful number of routes we run daily, the successful stops and the amount of kids that we pick up daily, the kind voices that answers the phones when we call the call center to look for our lost bus. I'm asking the board tonight to really look and reconsider how we hire bus drivers, how we hire aides, how we hire call center reps. Look at the equipment. A lot of our equipment is obsolete. When I call about my credit card, it asks me what's my last 4 numbers, and then the computer comes back and it tells me what I want to know. Why can't we have a system where I say, I'm looking for Route 336, and the computer comes back on and says, it's 15 minutes late. If you have further questions, please push 1. We don't have the most updated technology that we need to have in this district to support our transportation team. So again, I'm asking you for respect for the work that they do, support us, get us the additional staff that we need. And I'm going to close with, this is Kindness Week in the district. So my kindness today was to do a kindness act for one person today. So my kindness act is to all the transportation department, from the administrators down to the mechanics, the bus drivers, the aides, the call center reps, the secretaries in the school taking the calls. My kindness to all of them is thank you for transporting the students in the city of Columbus. Thank you for getting assaulted on your school bus and still coming back the next day to drive our babies. Thank you for answering the phone calls when you're called every name but the name your mother gave you. Thank you for all you do. So in honor of Columbus City Schools Kindness Week, thank you, Transportation Department. Columbus City School Board, please know that this is a national problem. I don't stand here today to beat you up because I get frustrated when my folks are beat up. What I stand here today to say to you, let's work together for one bus driver, 1 aide equals 20 kids that we can get to school safely, and we do it every day. So public out there, know that we get more kids to school on time than we do late. Know that we safely transport, and we do a job that nobody else would want to do. I, as a parent, couldn't stand my 3 kids in the back seat. He touched me. She's looking at me. This isn't right. I can't imagine driving a big yellow bus with 62 kids screaming, "He touched me. He took my lunch. Stop here. My mom said let me off. Don't do this." Thank you, Transportation. Thank you, Columbus City Schools Board.
Thank you, President Carson, for those words. Our next speaker is President Nana Watson from the NAACP. Topic, personnel matters, action, do not do a search. President Watson.
Good evening, President Adair, members of the school board, Interim Superintendent Chapman. Let me just say, the NAACP is concerned about several issues relating to the allocation of funds, taxpayer dollars, toward the search for a new superintendent. Of course, we as you want to make sure these funds and the decisions that are made are in the best interest of our students so that collectively we can be good stewards of tax dollars. You have engaged a law firm, and I tell you what, I tried to find that legislation on the internet, Columbus City Schools internet. It was so hard to navigate. It drove me crazy. So I want you to share that legislation and when it was passed and those expenses, including the scope of work assigned. Then can you clarify the necessity for a search since it has been stipulated, unless there's something that we're missing, that Dr. Chapman is the candidate of choice? In that light, can you elaborate on the former superintendent's role with providing transitional leadership and guidance to the selected candidate as she is employed per her agreement until June 2023? What type of training is she providing to Dr. Chapman and her team? It was reported in today's dispatch that Columbus City Schools is spending $25,000 for executive coaching. Can you elaborate on the purpose and how this expenditure is benefiting our students? We are seeking answers. We want to work with the district in a collaborative fashion so that we collectively do what will benefit our students so that we can receive a quality education that will prepare them to be productive adults. Thank you for your consideration, and hopefully you will respond to our questions. Thank you.
Thank you, President Watson, and we will definitely respond to those. I just want to clarify one piece of information you shared about Dr. Chapman. Dr. Chapman is our interim. This status does not give her preferred status, just to clarify that. But we will answer the rest of your questions in a very timely manner.
Okay, I thank you for that, but some of you board members have said that she is the candidate that you want. So I'm putting that out in the open, and if it's not true, then you need to squelch that, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Watson. Okay, our next speaker who is joining us virtually, so we will have our board liaison join us, Marissa LaPalamento. Topic, the academic calendar. Action, consider the impact of student days off to student outcomes.
President Adair, the speaker's on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Hello?
You have 3 minutes to address the board. You may
Okay,
begin.
great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening. My comments and questions are regarding the school calendars that I saw on the board documents for today. And first of all, I would just like to thank you for addressing 2 years at once, as this makes planning much easier for families who need summer childcare. However, I'm wondering why we didn't start the calendar process until February and it won't be approved for another month. And also why no input was sought from families, as has been done in past years. My next question or comment is about the number and calendar placement of the professional development days and how they're determined. Why does CCS have significantly more professional development days than other districts, and even more proposed in the next 2 years as in past years? I noticed that the proposed calendars have 7 PD days per year. We had 6 this year, and other districts typically have 1 to 3. Do we have any data on how teacher PD days affect student outcomes? And is there a benefit to having the days off in the middle of the week, which is disruptive to the weekly routine of going to school every day, as well as the flow of lessons in the classroom? And then my final question or comment is that I have noticed that other school districts have their start, end, and break times aligning with the end of the quarter to minimize disruptions to learning. Has CCS ever considered doing something similar to that? I know that currently the quarter ends sort of end in the middle of a multiple week period of time. That's all I had. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for bringing those questions. We will get those answered, and I will just say that the board has also received several emails from constituents regarding the calendar process and similar questions to this, so it may be of benefit to put more information out about the process and how families can get involved with that and answer her questions as well more publicly. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move to item 4, the superintendent's report. Dr. Chapman.
Thank you, President Adair. I have a few brief updates to share with the board tonight. Black History Month. First and foremost, as we head into February, we honor African Americans' achievements throughout history. February is Black History Month, and it is an excellent time to celebrate African Americans' vital contributions to history, culture, and society. Throughout this month, students will learn and research local and national historical figures. I am eager to see students gain this valuable knowledge and that their appreciation continues to grow for African American history. Additionally, many schools throughout the district will be hosting events to honor this month. I look forward to celebrating this month with our community and our CCS family. It was a busy weekend for CCS this past weekend with the National Panhellenic Council of Columbus. On Saturday, the NPHC hosted its 7th annual Youth Summit at Champion Middle School. This year's theme was Leadership, Social Action, Human Rights Initiative, and Perseverance. Students learned about several critical topics, including mental health, affording college, cyberbullying, maintaining successful habits, and social action and human rights. Students participated in workshops, discussions, team-building activities, and more. Our mayor, Andrew Ginther, City Council President Shannon Hardin, and State Representative LaTanya Humphrey also made special appearances to support our youth. Mayor Ginther presented the class of 2023 seniors across Central Ohio participating in the summit, including CCS student and superintendent student ambassadors, Kali Curtis and Columbus Afrocentric Badia Corral of CAS, Hafsa Musa from Northland, and Electra Sims of Marion Franklin. Also happening over the weekend was the I Know I Can Financial Aid and Scholarship Workshop. Nearly 160 students got help completing and submitting scholarship applications and the FAFSA. The event also offered breakfast sessions for parents with important information on preparing students for college and financial aid opportunities. I Know I Can is a vital partner in our district's college and career readiness efforts. They work tirelessly to help students and teachers with initiatives such as FAFSA completion, scholarship applications, and the Columbus Promise. Additionally, this weekend marked the 3rd week of the CCS Region 3 Extracurricular Co-Ed Elementary Basketball League, hosted at Buckeye Middle School. Students and the community enjoyed games, good sportsmanship, and family engagement. Organizers also collected hygiene products for that week's community service theme. And this week, we are kicking off Relationship Week. Yesterday kicked off the 7th annual Columbus City Schools Relationship Week. Caring and supportive relationships are critical to students' learning, well-being, and success. Every day this week has a theme, with yesterday being Start with Hello. Here are the themes for the rest of the week. For today, it's one act of kindness, as President Lois Carson mentioned earlier. Wednesday is all about forgiveness. Thursday is about celebrating diversity, and Friday is No One Eats Alone. So across the district, I'm sure you'll see that our staff, our students will be connecting over a meal and fellowshipping over a meal on Friday. The Department of Equity, Office of Social Emotional Learning, and Student Supports invites all CCS staff and students to participate. As we interact daily with colleagues, students, families, and community partners, take time this week and throughout to enhance those relationships. This week is also National School Counseling Week. Our school counselors are dedicated, talented, and student-centered. They are a critical part of our school buildings, working tirelessly to ensure we focus on the whole child and meet the needs of all students. Thank you to all of our tremendous CCS counselors. Additionally, I want to recognize our class of 2023 January graduates. We had 23 students who graduated and ventured into the next chapter of their lives. Getting to this point took a lot of hard work and dedication, and I hope students feel proud of what they have accomplished. Congratulations on this major milestone, and we look forward to seeing where your journey takes you next. And thank you to all the staff members and families who have supported and encouraged these graduates along the way. As the class of 2023 explores their options for life after high school, some may be working on their Columbus Promise applications. Recently, we welcomed the inaugural class of the Columbus Promise Scholars back for their second semester at Columbus State Community College. The Free College Initiative resulted in 693 Columbus City Schools graduates from the class of 2022 joining Columbus State's first cohort of Columbus Promise Scholars. The inaugural class represented a 100% increase compared to 2021, when 313 CCS graduates enrolled at Columbus State. This collaborative initiative was launched in the fall of 2021 and enables all CCS grads to go to college tuition-free at Columbus State Community College. It covers 6 semesters of tuition and fees, grants an additional scholarship for expenses like books, offers unique services and support, and connects them to jobs. I also want to thank our partners from the City of Columbus, Columbus State, and I Know I Can for making this partnership possible. Getting students ready for life after high school is vital. However, to get to that point, we also need to make sure middle school students are prepared for their next step. A recent grant awarded from Google to the district will help to do just that by jumpstarting their career exploration opportunities. This $100,000 grant will transform career technical education pathways for middle schoolers and give them valuable experience as they plan for their futures. This grant-funded initiative aims to allow students to learn from and work alongside industry leaders. Students will get a head start in today's rapidly changing workforce by honing technical skills and working toward industry credentials. The district currently offers more than 40 CTE programs at the high school level, including new programs in IT, engineering, bioscience technology, and manufacturing. This investment allows CCS to create an earlier introduction to upper-level programs. The Winter Family Survey is now open. CCS is collecting responses for a family school relationship survey to learn how we can better support our students and families. The survey window is now open through Friday, February 17th. Through the survey, we hope to learn more about students' school experiences this year. Families can access the survey on the CCS website. All responses are completely anonymous and will help us to plan programs, resources, and services to benefit our students and the school community. Additionally, I want to remind families that the virtual school choice fair for elementary school is happening tonight, February 7th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Families have the opportunity to explore possible educational options for their students by viewing specifically tailored video presentations available now on the CCS website and each school site. We've shared updates on initiatives that have the potential to create post-secondary opportunities for our graduates, such as the Columbus Promise, and a new effort that could help jumpstart students' career exploration opportunities. However, before students walk across the stage and collect their diplomas, some state and district requirements must be satisfied in 3 key areas: course completion, demonstrating competency, and fulfilling requirements to earn at least 2 diploma seals. The Ohio Department of Education has revised graduation requirements in recent years, which includes the diploma seal requirements for the class of 2023 and beyond. The seals capture ways in which our students can demonstrate that they are ready to enter the workforce or pursue post-secondary training or college. As Dr. Milligan will explain, the seal types, including the local seals, are defined by law. You'll recall that the legal requirements for the seal have required us to revisit the board goal, which was anchored to a graduation seal. Today's conversation is not about the board goal or monitoring report for the portrait of a graduate. It is instead about our local seals and the requirements for those seals. We will be continuing to engage the board regarding the portrait goal throughout this spring. Tonight, our presentation will focus on the diploma seal requirements as defined by the state. I've invited Dr. Tanya Milligan, our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, to provide additional insight into the new requirements as they pertain to our administrative guidelines.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman. Good evening, President Adair, Vice President Vera, and board members. I appreciate this opportunity to share this information regarding the graduation requirements that go into effect for the graduating class of 2023. Tonight's presentation aligns with board goal closing opportunity gaps, increasing graduation rates. The purpose of this presentation is threefold. First, I want to give you an opportunity to get a general overview of the new graduation requirements. Second, I'd like to provide an overview of the requirements for the CCS local diploma seals. And finally, to request that the Board of Education approve the resolution adopting the administrative guideline memorializing the requirements for the state-defined, locally adopted CCS diploma seal. Although typically a Board of Education adopts policies and not administrative guidelines, this one is unusual as state law requires this administrative guideline to be adopted by the Board of Education. Hopefully in front of you, you have the document that has a visual, has 3 columns. I believe we have it in your resources in English, French, Nepali, Spanish, Arabic, and Somali. The nice thing about this visual is it clearly delineates what students need to do in order to graduate in a visual manner, which tends to help with communication with our students and our families. So there are 3 columns because the new law introduces a 3-pronged approach to graduation. So I'll go through each column to give an opportunity to review those requirements. The new graduation requirements were signed into law in September of 2021, and it affects the graduating class of 2023, so this year, and classes thereafter. The nice thing about these new requirements is that it does give students more flexibility in choosing their graduation pathway. So the 3-pronged approach, threefold. So first you have earn course credit, demonstrate competency, and earn diploma seals. This is the first year that the diploma seals are required to graduate from high school. So I'm going to go, excuse me, I'm going to go through each column, each step. So the first step is to earn course credit. The state requires 20 credits specifically. Columbus City School adds 2 additional credits. That includes our academic elective and our internship credit for a total of 22 credits. This has not changed. This is the same as it has been historically. The next column, the middle column, is what we would refer to as the testing aspect of the graduation requirement, demonstrating competency. The 2 tests that students must demonstrate competency is Algebra 1 and English 2. So our goal is that our students will have that opportunity to pass those tests and meet that competency score. However, if they do not meet that competency score, they have an opportunity to retest, and once they've retested and still have not met that score, they have 4 other opportunities to demonstrate competency. The first is they can earn college credit in math and/or English. The second option is they can achieve a remediation-free SAT score. The third is that they can demonstrate 2 career experiences, and these include pre-apprenticeship, a 12-point industry credential, acceptance into post-secondary apprenticeship, or a workforce readiness score on the WorkKeys assessment. The fourth option is they can enlist in the military prior to graduation. So that's the demonstrating competency column. The third column is what the focus of this presentation is about, is the diploma seals. So state law defined 12 diploma seals, and they're circled there on the slide. At least they were. They're there. Great. So those top seals, the top visuals, are the state-defined seals, and these requirements are set by the state. These include seal of biliteracy, citizenship, college ready, honors diploma, industry recognized credential, military enlistment, Ohio means jobs, science, and technology. In order to graduate, all students must earn 2 diploma seals, and at least one of those seals must be a state seal. The second part of this column down at the bottom, those 3 visuals down at the bottom, those are the local seals, and these are 3 seals defined by the state as local seals. Those are student engagement, fine and performing arts, and community service. State law requires that school districts adopt at least 1 local seal, which can be earned by meeting requirements adopted by local boards of education. Our CCS teams of educators have developed requirements for all 3 seals to ensure that our students have options and that are tailored to their interests. So the administrative guideline, I believe you have a copy in your resources. So the guideline was crafted first through teams of educators in the last school year, 21-22. We had a review of several school districts in Ohio and how they were handling the administrative guideline regarding the local seals. The administrative guideline was vetted with the interdepartmental team, high school counselors, high school principals, and executive leadership, and reviewed by a group of high school students, student leaders in grades 9 through 12. So the 3 seals, what are the requirements to earn each seal? So the first seal we'll look at is the student engagement local seal. So in order for a student to earn this seal, they must participate in 3 meaningful extracurricular activities during high school. That could include athletics, it could be clubs, student government. There's a lot of activities students can use for this seal. Additionally, if students do activities outside of school with community organizations, with their churches, 4-H, those can also qualify as one of these activities. Due to the pandemic, we are phasing in the requirements for cohorts 2023 and 2024 because they had limited access to extracurricular activities during that time period. The second local seal was the Fine and Performing Arts local seal. So students must earn a B- or better in 1.0 credits of an advanced art class. So our entry-level arts classes, fine and performing arts, are referred to as our survey classes. So it's above and beyond those classes in any area of the fine and performing arts. Or they can participate in a fine or performing arts activity or performance. So it might be an art exhibit, it might be a play that they're involved in with the school, it could be all sorts of activities. And the third seal is our community service local seal. In order for a student to earn this seal, they must engage in 45 hours of community service, which is defined as service to the school and our community designed to help people within that community. Internship hours may be used if they meet the definition of community service. So again, in order to graduate, all students must earn 2 diploma seals. They can use 2 state seals, or they can get 1 state and 1 local seal. And that's all graduating seniors this year and thereafter. Now, we start the planning for graduation in middle school. We start having those conversations and give students an opportunity to explore their interests. Our counselors work hard with our middle school students to get them thinking about future opportunities. This continues into our students' 9th grade year with their academic supports team. That includes their counselors, their teachers, their principals, their family members, really thinking about what are the students' interests and strengths. And tailoring the graduation pathway, which is nice about the new requirements because it gives us a lot of flexibility pertaining to students' interests and strengths. It's then reviewed and modified each year based on students' changing interests and strengths, which happens a lot with teenagers. So we were interested in seeing what our seniors were choosing for those students who were selecting the local seal as one of their graduating options. And so interestingly enough, the one that they're choosing the most is our community engagement seal, community service seal. So you can see that the vast majority are choosing that seal, and then the second seal is the fine and performing arts, and then the student engagement seal. So you can see the very diverse interests, and there's a diverse way that they're earning those seals. So in conclusion, again, we ask that you approve the resolution to adopt this administrative guideline. And is there any clarification that I can provide regarding the local seal administrative guideline prior to approving this resolution?
Are there questions? Dr. Pierce?
So my question relates to how are we communicating this information to our staff outside of just our teaching staff, particularly our coaches who may only come in contact with our students for a season and may not know about the seals or be available to sign documentation when said documentation needs to be signed.
Yeah. So as a former high school principal, communication is key. And not just one point of communication, multiple points of communication. So most of our schools have communication strategies, newsletters, messages that go out on a regular basis to staff and community. Oftentimes, this will be a part of that messaging in addition to the work that our counselors do. You know, anyone who works with our students, we try to work hard and make sure that they're aware of the supports our students need. And so a multitude of messaging opportunities, whether it be staff meetings, whether it be through the athletic director, whoever, we just try to get it out there as much as possible.
I wonder if it could be a part of their onboarding, that when they go to sign their documentation, that we have information in here about the seals, so then they're also communicating that to their students as their students are participating in these activities. My last question then is around the community service seal, and I know we have 45 hours. How does that align with what we've done in the past in terms of our students' required community service? Do we see that our students are achieving more than the 45 hours, and Are we happy where that's at?
So currently, our students are required to do 120 hours of internship. Oftentimes, that's work-based learning. However, at least 30 of those hours have to be community-based service. And so it just really depends on the student. Even though we set the max at 120, we have kids that earn 250, 300, doing all sorts of community service and support throughout the school and throughout their neighborhoods. So they can use those hours. It's not a limiting factor in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it encourages them to do more of that work.
And so I guess that's where I wonder with the Elise, is there a way that we as a district can highlight the service that our students are doing that goes above and beyond the 45 hours, if you see what I'm saying? So our students are doing a lot of community service. They're getting a lot of work experience. And I think when we focus on the lesser of what's required, we miss the opportunity to show how our students are going above and beyond.
And I would just like to add that if we go back to the overview, the document with the 3 columns, our students actually have to earn credit for their community service. So we certainly recognize that that is unique to our district and unique to our expectations, what we've communicated to our community, to our students, and to our schools, that not only is this a nice to have, it is a requirement, it is an expectation. So our expectations in CCS as it relates to community service exceed the requirements for the seal.
Thank you. Board Member Reyes.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe I'm a little bit along the same lines on the community service piece as a community organization. It would be helpful when our students are going to do those hours to have a clear definition of what they can do, would do, because a lot of community organizations want to assist our students in completing those hours, but it's sometimes difficult when you're doing your everyday job to try to figure out, are they going to be doing filing? Are they going to answer the phone? If so, what skill sets do the children come with? You know, kind of, I mean, it would be helpful, like, what is it that they can do so that the organization knows where to place them and if they can be placed within that organization. 45 hours goes really quickly for an organization, but like a small organization like myself would be very grateful to have a student, but it's we want to help, but it's difficult if we're not clear on where and how we can help the student. And I was wondering, in that vein, when you're talking about what can qualify, do we include or expand on diverse options? Something that we may not be accustomed to say, this would be considered community engagement, or something that is helping the community. Can we, is that a broad brush that we can say? Because sometimes people think the typical, answer the phone, go to an office, work in a food pantry. And if a student comes to us and says, I would like to be an interpreter for an organization that is helping somebody fill out forms, is that something that would be counted as an opportunity?
What's nice, what's nice about the community service hours is that we get to work with young people defining what that means. Because even though I might not see it as community service, our students may see it, and our community may see it. And so there's no rigid parameters to that. I think the most important thing is that students are able to define that, and it's meaningful for them, and it's meaningful for the community. That's what it's all about. So if that works, it's completely open. And I love the idea of diverse opportunities for students, because I know there's a lot of opportunities out there we probably don't take advantage of. And so it's great to give them some opportunities to explore and see what's out there, try something new, something different. That would be a great opportunity for them.
And I know Columbus City Schools has a list of community partners that we work with on a regular basis. It would be something that reaching out to those organizations and say, you know, these are the type of opportunities we could use a high school student for. I think that would also help those students that maybe like, I don't know where to go other than down the street, but maybe they want to do something that's outside of what they would normally do. So that would be helpful for us as community organizations to respond. So I appreciate that. In that same vein, when you're talking about the performing arts seal, not all of us are some of us are artistically challenged. Would that include a student that maybe just wants to be involved in the ticket sales of a performing event or cleaning up after an art exhibition? You know, somebody that wants to be involved, but they may not be necessarily gifted in the arts.
Artistically inclined.
Yes.
Right. So a lot of our students who, and I'll just use a theater program, for example. We have students that want to support the theater, but they're not theatrical in nature. But there's all sorts of things that they could do to support the program. Typically, they're a member of a club in that regard, and they would participate as a member of that club. So absolutely, that would count as participation in an event.
And those questions just come from in mind, like when you showed that graph of where students actually where they pick, that might be some of the challenges. Like, well, what exactly does it mean if I did, you know, what could be an example of what I could do if I'm not gifted in performance, or I'm too shy and don't really want to go work in a community group? What are other options I could do? Like, you know, off the top of my head, sometimes we need people to make phone calls, you know, to find out all the, I'm just making this up, to find out all the ESL programs in a certain zip code. A student doesn't necessarily have to come into an office, but we can work with a student and sign off on that work. So I was just wondering if that, looking outside the box, would make a difference in what the students would be involved in. So I appreciate the
Yeah, and that's
responses.
possible. What's nice about the seals is, again, the students can mix and match and tailor them to their interests. They're not limiting in any way, in a sense that we, again, work with our students and get a good understanding of their interests and their strength, and we guide them in those ways. So this seal would be a great idea for you because of these things that you like to do, that you're engaged in. And it might change, you know. A freshman in high school might think they want to do one thing and then decide they want to do something completely different. And there's enough flexibility in the process for them to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Vice President Vera.
Thank you. So I have just a few questions. In regards to our does our CTE programs count towards the student engagement seal?
To my understanding, it can. It kind of depends. So CTE is going to be in that second column for their competency. There's also some state seals that it would count towards. But let's say they're in an engineering club or a robotics club, in addition to their CTE experiences. Those could definitely qualify as the local seal. So it just kind of depends on what the student is interested in and how they're using their time.
Thank you. And then in terms of, you know, I appreciate the data showing kind of the students who really kind of graph what their interests are at the present moment. What is our plan, you know, if we have students, for example, who do choose the fine and performing arts, if their high school doesn't have a theater program or an arts program? So from an equity standpoint, if our young people are choosing seals that their buildings don't have programs that actually will allow for this seal, what is our plan of action to making sure that they have access to get this seal?
So fortunately, we have a very robust visual and performing arts program throughout the district. All of our schools have the courses for students to be able to participate in the course itself. So that was the first requirement. The second one being if they don't have, let's say, a theater program, They can also engage in community theater programs. A lot of our students go to church, and they have opportunities there to do activities, whether it's music or theater. So there's a lot of flexibility built in to take that into consideration. We've always been really flexible about allowing students to engage in activities that they're interested in and find a way to make sure they have access to that. So sometimes that's partnering with another high school so that they can have that opportunity, or partnering with an organization in the local area that has an activity a student is interested in. Our goal is to remove any roadblocks to students' interests and not building them up. So that's what I really like about these seals, is they're not super rigid. We can figure out how to make them fit for our students, which is what our students need.
And thank you for explaining that, because that kind of leads me to my third question. In terms of what is our kind of placement process for helping our kids identify, like, for example, International High School, they don't have a theater program. So if we have a kid who wants to do theater, is it the school counselors? Like, how are we helping to ensure that our kids actually find these placements? And is that part of what they can get in their buildings to help with that placement piece?
A lot of that comes down to the academic support team. So we have counselors, teachers, administrators, family members, all working to support students. And if a student is expressing an interest, a passion for something, we're going to figure out how to give them that opportunity. So it could be, again, partnering with another school. It could be, seeking out a community organization. We've been really successful historically with students who expressed interest, finding a partner to support them. We have a lot of amazing partners. As a high school principal, I really leaned into those partners to meet our students' needs. And so that's kind of where that conversation would take place. And then seeking out through that list of partnerships that we have to find something that would meet that need.
Okay. So there will be some component of monitoring then, in terms
Absolutely.
of making sure that buildings are, if we have an influx of kids that want a certain type of support in terms of the seals, we're monitoring what that is.
And I would just like to add to Vice President Vera that these conversations begin early. We don't wait to have these conversations until 12th grade, right? So we're having these conversations very early on, and students are choosing their pathway. All of our students have lots of agency in choosing the pathway that makes the most sense for them. And then that also gives our school leaders and our counseling team input and feedback on additional courses and programs that we should be offering that they can add to their course deck in the next semester or the next school year. So it is an ongoing conversation, it's a dialogue, but it begins very early to ensure that the staff, family members, all stakeholders have plenty of runway to adjust, adapt, modify to ensure that our students have the options that they need so that they can be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman. And my final question is just in regards to the documentation process. As we know, this is a lot of documentation that our families are going to have to be charged with to collect, to have our partners fill out, or whomever. So can you speak to the technology, or what is the process for making sure that we're effectively tracking this documentation, and how can families, how are they going to be kept on top of where their kids are at? I hear us saying we're communicating, but then oftentimes here, you might have a parent that works 2 and 3 jobs. They miss that virtual meeting. Now my kid is a junior or senior and needs these hours. What exactly is our tracking process to make sure our kids are on track? How are we capturing that information through our documentation? And then just the follow-up process with families.
Thank you for that question. So obviously documentation is a challenge, and making sure we have all our pieces and parts in place. And with as many activities as our students are engaged in, you do have to have a robust system in place to make sure that you capture that effectively. We don't want any students to be negatively impacted by a lack of systems oversight. And so oftentimes, so let's say a student is involved in athletics. right? So in that instance, our athletic directors are the point person for ensuring that documentation is uploaded into our student management system, which is really nice because it's all right there and we're able to see exactly what documentations are showing up. Our counselors are involved, our administrators are involved, making sure we have all of that documentation as students are engaging in these activities. So for example, if a student is involved in art club, the advisor would be the one to share that documentation. Like, the student worked with me all year long. Here is evidence of their participation. Let's get that uploaded into the system. And then the counselors are continually having conversation, back to that academic support team. We also have matriculation teams for each grade level that monitor the progress towards graduation requirements. And so what's nice, again, about the information management system is that they can look in that system under documentation and see exactly what's in there. That's not to say that we won't have glitches. We do have
Can
glitches.
parents see that though? Like, is that an Infinite Campus? Like, how, as a parent, if I submit my daughter's hours for art club, is how on my end am I able to, is that something that families will see in their kids' Infinite Campus? How are families able to track that documentation has actually been submitted?
So typically that comes through communication from the school. It's not something, there's certain areas of the student management system that parents do not have access to. There's parent facing and then there's district facing. So I believe the documents tab is not something that can be seen. It's not a public facing part of the program. But it is incumbent upon us as building leaders, it is incumbent upon us as support teams to effectively communicate with parents on a regular basis. So if we see that there's anything amiss with their progress, we are reaching out in whatever way we can. Sometimes it's going out into the community and talking to the families, doing home visits. If not able to reach them on phone or email, there's a variety of ways that we try to do that. Our goal is to never let a student fall through the gaps that we've created, right? We want to make sure we know what those gaps are, and we can have a safety net for our students. No system is perfect, so it's really helpful to hear from our families and say, hey, I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know my student needed this, and then we can be reflective of our communication systems and where did we miss this? You know, how did we, we have all these touch points. How did we miss touching this scenario and that put this student at risk? So that's really incumbent upon leadership within every school.
And we are also working on migrating to a new system called School Links that allows us the opportunity to track all of the graduation requirements, and there's a parent-facing component of that. So we have been piloting that software system and working out the kinks to ensure that it can stand up to meet our needs and have one place for all of the data to be collected. So this is School Counseling Week, and I want to shout out, use this as an opportunity to shout out all of our school counselors who are certainly very diligently keeping track of all of the data for all of our students to ensure that they are on track for graduation. So as we think about whether it's any of these categories, the credits and the internship hours, it is that team, that matriculation team that is meeting regularly, monitoring the data, and tracking the data in real time. It changes fluidly, right? It changes real time, but there's also a component where they ensure that there's communication between home and school.
Board Member Cole.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you so much for this presentation this evening. I appreciate a lot of the information I've gotten thus far. My question about these 9 seals, particularly of the 12, the 9 state defined, is there a grade requirement attached to earning those seals? My kids, who've now since graduated, since last year and 2 years before that, they earned a lot of these seals. They earned a lot of these seals that also came with a grade requirement of B or better. Is this still the same paradigm today? That requirement is B or better to earn these seals?
For the state seals, there are some that have grade requirements, yes.
okay? I love to be sure to make that we identify to our youngsters what those SEAL opportunities actually are. The other piece is what is the proportion of students actually earning these 9 SEALs? So it's awesome that we've got the data on, as Board Member Vera said earlier on, where kids are identifying SEALs of interest, but where is our information about what SEALs of the 9 that are academically based, where are they earning those SEALs? What proportion of students are actually earning those SEALs?
Thank you for your question. We don't have that data here tonight, but we can get you that data. We
I
definitely
would
have
appreciate that.
Mhm.
I'd definitely like us all to be able to see that. That's it for me. Thank you.
Board Member Beckerly.
I want to follow up on something Vice President Vera hit on, which is the equity piece. And I think that what I'd like to request is that we track the demographics isn't the right word, but pockets. You know, if we're seeing that there's certain schools or certain segments that aren't doing fine arts. Is there a reason for that? Is it because they didn't want it, or is it because it wasn't as available to them? Because I think that, you know, having been in the high school, I know that, you know, how hard everyone works to make sure you've got your requirements, and, you know, we're always checking. But just to use it as a way of sort of checking on the equity piece. If we see patterns where, you know, and maybe even like a post-graduation survey, like, had you had a chance to do a fine art SEAL, would you have been interested, and why didn't you? And, you know, because there's those subtle ways in which, yes, there's fine arts in every building, but maybe some people don't feel like they have access to it or something like that. So I think that this is an opportunity both to make sure we're getting those, you know, to track ourselves, and we can start with a baseline. And, you know, another way to make sure we're achieving equity as well as, you know, getting the opportunities to all the kids. So I'd like to see that data starting out as a baseline so we can sort of triangulate or touch base on if we're really reaching everyone with the opportunities.
Dr. Pierce.
So we spent a lot of time talking about the documentation and really also the verification that the activities and work has been performed. And this really isn't a question, it's more of a request. Can we give thought to how we can create a district-wide system for that documentation? So one would question, is the community service form that's being filled out at CAS different from the community service form that's being filled out at Mifflin? What happens when a student leaves from Fort Hayes and transfers over to Linda McKinley? Is that documentation following them in their portal, in their system? What happens when you have students that are participating in their sports at their home schools, but are charter school students? Who's making sure that their sports and documentation has been verified for their schools? Because those schools might have different forms than we have. And how can we, in some way, as you said, Dr. Chapman, make sure that that's computerized? I said computerized. That's not even a word. I just made up a new word here. But to make sure that that we have that online, so no matter how a family transitions, that documentation is with that student and with that family.
I had a question about transfer students as well, similar to Dr. Pierce. That question, but in addition, not just students who do intertransfer, but students who might be coming into the district in like 12th grade. What type of reciprocity do we have, like with charter school service, things that they might have done, or even other states? I mean, is that something that I didn't really see that in the admin guidelines, how things transfer?
Yeah, I think there's a couple areas that do speak to transfer students. And absolutely, if a student participated in a theater program in their previous high school and they transfer in, absolutely, that would contribute to these seals. So there's a multitude of ways that we could get documentation. Oftentimes, when students transfer in, we get transfer records, and oftentimes it'll document that students have been involved in extracurricular activities. Our record secretary often reach out to schools to clarify records. So if a student is saying, hey, I participated in this activity or this student leadership organization or something, you know, it's easy as giving the school a call and verifying that. So again, we want to make sure that students' efforts are honored and that we're able to help facilitate that. We don't want to limit any of our students getting credit for the things that they're doing.
And another follow-up to something Michael was asking about, just some of the data. In addition to the seal, each seal, what do we know the average amount of seals our students are getting? Like 2's the minimum, but I could also see a lot of students getting a lot of these seals. Yeah. Is there like a number? Do we know the average? Is that something that we're tracking and also highlighting? And then for those that you mentioned who might be, for some reason we missed or struggling, is there a certain percentage, and do we know why that's happening to them? Like, is this the requirement that's somehow putting a barrier to their graduation? They have everything else. It's just these seals that's the problem. Does that happen, or do we feel really confident that our process and our procedures and everything we're doing is really ensuring that this requirement is not the barrier, like such as finishing at credits or something like that?
So this is the first year it's a requirement. Last year was optional. Students can earn the seals. This is the first year that they absolutely have to in order to graduate. So we're going to be very mindful and reflective of the processes we have in place. And if we're finding that our processes are creating barriers for students, then we have to adjust them because we want our students to be successful. So again, this is the first year we've really had a robust system because it is indeed required. So we engage in reflective practices across the board. And of course, if something is detrimental to a student, we're going to figure out how to make sure that that doesn't impact that individual student or other students.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Chapman, back to you.
Thank you, President Adair, members of the board. This concludes our interim superintendent's report for tonight.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move over to our internal auditor, Auditor Smith.
Oh, thank you, President Adair, Vice President Vera, members of the board. I do have a brief update on the January 26, 2023 Audit and Accountability Committee meeting. We had a really good meeting. A lot of the information you have already received, you know, in your written report, so I won't go over that, but that did include the release of 2 reports. It included an executive summary of the activities of the Office of Internal Audit. What I wanted to highlight is the discussion that we had regarding how to resolve open issues. So at the conclusion of every audit, not just that the Office of Internal Audit does, but also any external auditors, there will be recommendations that are made. And typically, when the recommendations are made, there will be actions that administration has agreed to take to deal with the recommendations. Sometimes those actions do happen, and we are able to go out and to verify that, yes, the action has been taken, the action is effective, and we can close that item. Sometimes the action doesn't happen, and then what happens on our end is we are keeping track of what we call open issues. And that list over the years has grown significantly. So the committee had a really good conversation on what's on that list. Is it still relevant? If it's not, well, let me back up. What's on the list, and for the fact that it's been on there for a couple of years, does that mean that we are accepting the risk, even though there's been no declaration that that's what we are doing? So we had a conversation on, first of all, how do we get answers to that question? And then once we get those answers, how do we, going forward, keep the committee up to date as far as these are now the true open issues, and have administration come in and describe, what they are doing to close those issues. We didn't work out the answers at that one meeting, but it is a good conversation that we had. The committee members were all engaged, so I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. The next item that I wanted to highlight, you all received a survey for a risk alignment pilot that we are leading. The Columbus City Schools Office of Internal Audit is leading. So thank you to those who have completed the survey. And if you haven't, there's still time. So once again, I just want to highlight that the committee was excited about that. They were happy to see that we were able to take a survey that's generally sent and geared towards private and public companies and not really tweak it, actually overhaul it to be more specific to issues that will be more relevant for school districts. So it is a pilot, so I don't know what's going to come of it, but so far I think we are working with either, I want to say maybe 8 districts. We have gotten, positive feedback from all the districts that have received it. And then we ended it with cake, which is always a good way to end a meeting. So that is my update, and I'll be happy to take any questions or hear from the chair and the vice chair.
Go ahead, Chair.
Yeah, just a further plug on that survey. It's part of a effort that's through the Council of Great City Schools, and it's really exciting that we're leading the way, and also it's an important initiative because as with everything at the council, we're trying to figure out ways to solve, challenges with urban education, and so it's important that we do our best to complete the survey and help that process go forward with our input. So that's my plug as well. And yeah, I just want to corroborate, or not corroborate, reflect, echo that we're talking about this whole lingering and or what to do about corrective measures and what's being closed out and what isn't. And stay tuned, because we're going to have some recommendations about how to handle it, which will include, on some level, or in some method, to keep the board proper informed about this, because part of what we realized is that we have to make sure that we're communicating through to the entire board on it. So stay tuned on that front, too.
Dr. Pierce, did you have something?
Yes, I appreciated the reports that were sent, and I appreciate you for noting where there's room for improvement. And so I look forward to seeing how our administration will come together to lessen some of those identified risks. And even though they're moderate, they're not high risk, how we can lessen those moderate risk and improve across those areas that your team identified. So thank you for noting that in your remarks tonight.
Additional questions?
That's
Thank you.
my report.
Thank you, Auditor Smith. That's your last report.
Thank you.
All right, over to the treasurer. Treasurer Bahork.
Thank you, President Adair and members of the board. This evening, I finally have a report for you. And this is a quarterly report that we've gone to, while the Finance Committee routinely each month reviews a monthly financial report. Because of the many of the variances are timing and they work themselves out over a quarterly period, we've gone to this report so that we can kind of bring to you more meaningful variances and look at this snapshot over a little bit longer period of time, but still keep you up to date on a regular basis. So this is the quarterly report for quarter 2, ending December 31st of 2022. In addition to this presentation, you have a written report that's included on the agenda. Just a reminder of how I've laid that written report out. It starts front to back from a very high level to increasing degree of specificity, so you can read the executive summary and kind of get an overall picture. If you're interested and are still awake, you can continue on down into the grouping of major revenue and expenditure categories. And then if you're really interested in some of the line item details, you can get into that in the latter part of the report. So that's available with the agenda as well. Through the second quarter, as is typically my report to FAC and to you, revenues are running above plan, about a little over $30 million through December. And expenditures are running below plan, about $25 million. And that drives the cash balance to about $55 million more than what was outlined in the plan. I will remind you that the plan is based upon, at this point, the November of 22 5-year forecast. So as we look at where we are, it is where we are relative to that 5-year forecast, and that these kinds of discussions then are a precursor to preparing the next update to the forecast, which is in May. So we get a pretty good feel that we're getting good results, and so those will be reflected in the next 5-year forecast.
Bless you.
There we go. Let's take a look at total revenues for the quarter. We received about $52 million in revenues. You'll notice here on the left-hand side of the graph, which is quarter by quarter, there's a pretty large disparity, quarter 1 versus quarter 2 versus quarter 3 versus quarter 4, and that's reflective of property tax collections, it being a major, over 50% of our revenue are local property taxes that comes in twice a year, once in the first quarter of the year, once in the second quarter, or third quarter of the year. On a year-to-date basis, of the $489 million in revenues, property taxes, including rollback and homestead exemption, which is the portion of property taxes that is you don't pay as a taxpayer and the state reimburses for it. So when we combine those two together, because they're all sourced from property taxes, it amounts to about 56% of our revenue through December. On a current year basis, $274 million has been received in property taxes and rollback and homestead exemption. Last year at this time, $273 million. Interestingly enough, just as a reminder, property taxes don't grow year to year much. There isn't much inflationary growth in there because of an interesting little bill called House Bill 920 and the reduction factor. So this demonstrates that it's really not growing much at all year over year. State aid, about 18% year to date through December of our total revenues. On a current year basis, just under $86 million received. About $72 million received at this point last year, and as you know, continued the new state funding formula being phased in, so we've got that growth going for us. Other revenue category, $39 million, about 8% of our revenue thus far through second quarter, $39 million this year. It was only $12 million last year. Now, this is other revenues where those pilot payments reside, and they're the ones that the commercial property tax payers, the commercial property owners, rushed to get those outside agreements in place before the new law kicked in, and so it was a benefit to them to get those multi-year outside of court settlement kind of agreements in place where we've agreed to a payment of taxes or a payment stream in lieu of them paying taxes through the regular system. Other financing sources, about 18% or $90 million. Last year we were at $9.7 million. That large difference is due to the advances that have occurred relative to the ESSER fund. So we advanced them out at the end of the year and then advanced them back in the first quarter. So that's just a cash flow balance sheet kind of a transaction. So that's where we reside on revenues in terms of the total amounts. When we look at the variances, you can see that for quarter 2, small dollar variance, $6 million, that was made up of very minimal de minimis property tax receipts. We were above plan of $18,000, so there wasn't much activity at all there. State aid, about $1.6 million above for the quarter. Other revenues, $1 million, and other financing sources, $3 million. So very, very small dollar amount activity in terms of variances. On a year-to-date basis, not much change from the first quarter to the second quarter. Obviously, that $6 million above plan behavior for second quarter. But on a year-to-date basis, property taxes, very much on target. We're just off by 0.4%. We're running about 1.1 million under plan through the second quarter. State aid, about 7 million above, 9% above. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we factored in a penalty, the transportation penalty. That's not been realized yet. So we'll see how that plays out. We're going to see some changes here in the coming months, actually in this month, February. So I'll get that, you'll hear that report later on in the year. But DPIA, or Disadvantaged People Impact Aid, is being phased in, and we got a catch-up payment in February. So kind of a spoiler alert for future reports. Advances in just a 2.8% below plan, about 2.5 million. And then other revenue year-to-date, as I said, almost 27 million above plan, almost triple what we have in the plan because of those pilots, and we didn't really anticipate that in the forecast and in the plan for this year. And just on a percentage basis, looking at the variances, about a 6% variance in the first quarter, 13% variance this quarter, and that works itself out on a year-to-date basis, that revenues are just under 7% over plan year-to-date. Moving on to expenditures. You can see in the current quarter, we received 190 million versus 191 million in the plan. So we're very close to plan that quarter on total expenditures. Year to date, out of the 425 million expended, 75% of that is personnel, 320 million through the second quarter. Last year, about 317 million. So very slow growth or small growth in our overall personnel costs. Keeping an eye on that. We have a lot of vacancies out there. We've a lot of positions being funded by ESSER, so we've got some comparability issues there, but not much difference from last year, just about 0.9% greater. Operating non-personnel, things like supplies, materials, purchase services, capital outlay, about 13% of our expenditures thus far through December, 56.4 million of that overall $425 million. Last year, about 51.3 to this point last year. So pretty comparable, expecting some growth, so that seems reasonable. Non-operating, non-personnel items, those advances and transfers and other expenditures, other objects that we've got that we spend money on, representing about 11% of our overall expenditures year to date. Current year, 48 million. We were at 12.5 million at this point last year. The big difference there, remember we decided this year that we would fund the capital budget at 36 million. So that was that transfer that went out in the first quarter to fund the capital budget. So that explains that difference between last year this time and this year. Since that capital budget transfer is kind of extraordinary, and you might be wondering, geez, I thought you always said that we spent 80% or more in personnel. If I factor that 36 million transfer out and recalculate the percentages, we end up at about 82% in personnel, 14% in the operating non-personnel versus 13%. And then these non-operating non-personnel items are really 3%, not 11%. So that I just wanted to share that with you because that transfer does distort the percentage relationship to total expenditures. On a variance basis, you can see in quarter two, like I said, very close, $900,000 on those total expenditures. Of that, personnel was within $84,000, so to say I was spot on kind of would be an understatement. As much as I want to take credit for that, I'd rather be lucky, lucky than good on that one, so we hit that very well. Non-personnel and operating non-personnel and non-operating non-personnel offset one another. Operating non-personnel is about 4.4 million under plan, and the non-operating non-personnel over in those advances and transfers and other objects, about 3.6 million above plan. So year to date, 25 million under plan. Obviously not much change from first quarter. Personnel accounts for the bulk of that, 20.6 million, about 6% under plan through December. And again, a part of that was plan design because we kind of front-end loaded the plan. Probably shouldn't have done that. I've admitted that now. I think probably, well, we're in the 7th month, so at least 6 times I've said I think it's plan design. And part of it is our vacancies, I believe. So, but that's running under. Operating non-personnel under plan about 16%, or almost 11 million. And then the operating non-personnel running over plan at 6.4, about 15%. So I think we've got a pretty good handle here on where, not only where we are, how we compared to last year, and why are there differences? Are we growing or not growing as we might expect? And then also where the variances are and what those explanations would be. You can see here on a percent variance basis, again, the bulk of our variance and expenditures occurred in Q1, not in Q2. We're now standing at about 5.6% below plan. And when you couple that with the 6.6% over plan or above plan on revenues, that then yields that $55 million increase in cash balance for as of December. Somewhat wrapping it up, again, total revenues above plan through Q2, expenditures below plan. We're building a cash balance at least through December. What's coming up next in terms of financial activity into Q1? In January, we began receiving collections on the first half, what we call first half property tax collections. We call them first half even though we're in the second half of our fiscal year. It's the first half of the tax collection year, which is tax year 23. So we're in that receiving advances period. I just got an email before the meeting that we will get settlement, I think it's like March 28th or March 29th. So by March, we'll have a complete picture on where we stand on the variance in property taxes. As I said earlier, we're within $1 million of our expectations on property taxes, so we'll see how this second half works out. We should be pretty close on property taxes. Here recently, I'm sure you've heard that the governor's budget has been released. We haven't seen numbers yet, but the good news is it was an intention, a stated intention, to continue the Fair School Funding formula mechanism. So that's a step in the right direction. Don't mess with the mechanism. Now let's talk about how it's going to be funded. Also, good news on that front, as I don't know whether I reported to you, but I did report to FAC, a position in my office, our data analyst. I lost my data analyst in January because he learned enough here to go get a treasurer's job somewhere else. And we recently promoted someone. He happens to be here in the audience, I think. Is Jordan still here? Jordan Hayes is here. And today, and he's a new parent as of the first part of January, so he's been a little busy with that family life, work-life balance. But early on, and just today we went through it, he has modeled the state funding formula and has run that out to 10 years or so. So we were able today to sit down and say, what would happen if? And he quickly changed the variables, and we're able to see that. So it'll be a great benefit as the numbers come out on the state budget, and we see the, what do they call it that OBM does? Simulations, that's the word I was struggling for. When they come out with simulations of what this formula will generate, I always want to know, how'd you come up with that number? Jordan's going to tell me how they came up with that number, all right? So that's really good that we're doing that in-house. It's, for those of you who love Excel spreadsheets and are data geeks, it was really a great afternoon to see how that all comes together. This formula is inordinately complicated in terms of the number of variables and if statements and the interaction of things. Most notably for us, as I mentioned before, is the interaction of what of those variables and how it affects our state share. So as you know, they call it local capacity. That's what we're supposed to pay. And kind of the inverse of that is what the state pays. So as we get wealthier in their calculation, we're supposed to pay more locally so they give us less from the state. Well, we're able to model that. So we can model what we anticipate the federal AGI goes, for our district goes up, and as personal income goes up, and unfortunately as our enrollment declines, you have the numerator going up, the denominator going down, state share or local share has to go up, therefore state share goes down. So we are able to model that and change those assumptions. It's really exciting, but I'll stop there because we probably need to move on. We are in the middle of the fiscal 24 budget presentation. My budget staff, led by Terry Addison, that's in process. There's going to be a couple of presentations to FAC. They're going to come, I think, in February and talk a little bit where we are on that anticipated or assumed reduction in non-personnel, and then see a more full-blown budget presentation in March. All of that will lead up then to the 5-year forecast presentations to FAC in April, and then to the board in May for the May presentation. So we're leading up to prepping for the May 5-year forecast. I'm in conversation with your ad hoc committee on levy planning, so all of this is feeding into that, and each day as we learn more, we've got models that can build into that and bring the most current information. So as I've always told you about 5-year forecasts, they're good once I print it, and then by the time I get to the printer and bring it back to me, it's that those assumptions can be stale, but we're able to, again, I'll just reiterate, we're able to take all that information, put it into our models, and be as current as we possibly can. So I think it's a good report through the end of quarter 2 in terms of it's always better to be over in revenues and under in expenditures and build that cash balance. We've got, I think, really good data and really good capability to make these computations and consider what's going on at the state and what we can do here locally and how that impacts the forecast, and we can do it fairly quickly. So I'm excited about that and pleased that I think we'll be able to do some planning and projecting and noodling, if you will, of what's the next year or 2 look like financially and in terms of operating levy kinds of issues fairly quickly, and make it easy to digest that for you and those who are listening in. So that's my quarterly financial report, and I'll close and see if I can answer any questions or take up more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll first turn it over to the chairs for comment.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be very quick. Thank you so much again for the presentation, Mr. Treasurer. As you guys have all heard, the same environmental issues exist in terms of our challenges that directly are tied to our student enrollment. I'm hoping that as we move forward, we're finding new ways of engaging our student population and actually recovering them. In new conversations that are ongoing between the treasurer and myself, and soon the committee, are those new avenues we're also looking at to identify revenue that is in emerging places where we can think about monetizing aspects of the district and making, recovering revenue or, something new altogether. So we're having those kind of conversations ongoing. Those will be revealed at a later time, but I just wanted to make sure you guys were well aware of that. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Member Beckerly.
Okay, I just want to ask the macro question. We're 55 million above plan mid-year. Where do we expect to be at the end of the year?
That's a great question. Any chance I could get back to you on that?
Sure.
I say that because I want to see what's happening with property taxes.
Okay.
And I want to do a deeper dive into this personnel expense question. We just recently recoded some personnel expenditures, about $8 million, out of the general fund and over to ESSER. So that's going to exacerbate this issue a bit, I think. So I have not yet, I typically sit down while I'm preparing the forecast to look for the end of the year. So I don't mean to put you off,
No,
but
not at all.
I can't say right now. Typically, we would build a balance. All we're seeing now are really results that would build a balance above what we planned, which is good. Will it be 55? Not sure, but we're on our way to continue that experience by the end of the year. I don't see anything looming out there that's going to come back and bite us, so to speak.
In any huge way.
You remember, one item can be the transportation penalty. I factored in $15 million. We do have a notice that we're in the $7 million range with a potential penalty for this year, and we haven't had to absorb the penalty from last fiscal year. So that's one thing on the horizon that will be negative to us pending the outcome of our lawsuit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're in item 7, which is board matters. We're going to have a presentation on the calendar, Dr. Chapman, and then over to James Barnes, our general counsel.
Yes, thank you, President Adair. I'm going to turn it over to James Barnes, who is going to lead us through the public hearing for the school calendar.
Okay, so this year we're probably, not probably, but are over a month ahead of the schedule we were last year. Last year we presented the proposed calendar, I believe was March 15th. There are a couple of things. Okay, let's see if I can. Okay, so today we're going to talk about process. We're going to review the proposed 4 calendars, calendar years 2023, 24, and 24, 25. There'll be, of course, an opportunity for you as board members to ask questions, and then we will be back on March 21st for approval of the calendar. Some of my presentation, part of my presentation will answer some, but not all, of the calendar speakers' comments and questions. However, there will be more than sufficient time for the public to comment on the calendars. The board, to be clear, the board is not taking any action today. Under Ohio statutory law, the board cannot take action on the calendar before the expiration of 30 days from this meeting, February 7th, before the calendar is introduced. So the board can't vote at its next meeting, which is February 21st. It cannot vote on March 7th, the meeting after that, because that's a total of 28 days. The earliest that the board can approve the calendar is, again, 30 days from today, which is March 19th. For the 30-day limitation, therefore, the 30 days, or the board cannot vote until, again, March 21st, unless it holds a special meeting to vote on the calendar. Again, the earliest would be March 9th. So the board is required, I talked about the Ohio Revised Code, the requirement to wait the 30 days. The board policy 8210 provides that and it is consistent with the law, that the board must address the number of hours of instruction for our students. Under the collective bargaining agreement with CEA, we are required to negotiate with the union regarding the school calendar. What that means is that the district is not in total control of the calendar. So under statutory law, kindergarten through 6th grade must have 910 hours of instruction. Grades 7 through 12 must have 1,001 hour of instruction. Up to 2 days of professional development can be counted toward those hours, as well as 2 days of parent-teacher conferences. Lunch periods and recess periods cannot count towards instruction hours. So, we do have, and this question came up last year during the calendar discussion, the average grade band hours for this school year for middle school was 1,019 hours. For high school, 1,030 hours. For elementary school, 996 hours. So you can see with those numbers that we do exceed the statutory minimum. For this year, we cannot be precise. For any given year, you can't be precise because our buildings are different and there are different lunch times, and per union contract, recess times for elementary schools may be an additional, there may be, those hours may vary because they are entitled to additional recess hours. Again, pursuant to our contract with CEA, the length of the school day is governed by that contract, and as you can see on the screen, the length of the school day is 6.5 hours for elementary schools. For K-8 buildings, typically 9 to 3:30, and the length of school day is 7 hours for middle and high schools, typically 7:30 to 2:30. So as we began the process of developing the school calendar, we had a collaborative effort with cross-functional team members within the district. Those teams were curriculum and instruction, student services, communications and engagement, human resources, and legal. As I mentioned earlier, we are required to negotiate with the union in regards to the calendar, and the union did play an active role in developing the calendar and are in agreement with the calendar that's presented to you today. The number of school hours in any given school year are inherently limited due to the contract. As you may be aware, the contract provides that teachers have 195 contract days. We cannot go beyond that. For additional 3 days for first-year teachers that begin before the school year begins, and those are induction days for new teachers. Now, last year, we did have a survey that went out to our families. Our family ambassadors sent that survey out, and we used many of those comments in developing the calendar for this year. Immediately after this meeting, the calendars will be posted on our website, and families will have an opportunity to view the calendars and comment on the calendars. So here is what the 2023-2024 traditional school calendar looks like. As you can see, it is color-coded. Yellow is the first and last day of classes for our students. Green is Professional Development Day, where schools are closed for students. Pink is early dismissal, and I may be a little colorblind, so those colors may not be what you see. Red, schools are closed for both staff and students. Gray are the ends of quarters, and dark blue is record day, and our students are not in class. So that's the 23-24 traditional school year calendar. This is the 2024-25 calendar, and if you see, if I can make this work, you can see it change. I'll do it one more time. I just like seeing it.
Okay, James Barnes.
Pretty cool, James.
Really cool.
Okay, so what you just saw and what this chart is a comparison of the dates from the traditional calendar 2023-24 versus 24-25. Just because the dates change from year to year, you can see the difference. You can see in this comparison for the two calendar years, Wellness Week, winter break, and spring break. And yes, we are continuing, hope to continue Wellness Week again this next school year and the following school year. You will see that spring break starts on April 1st on the 2023-24 calendar, but April 18th on the 24-25 calendar, and that's because traditionally we follow the Easter holiday when for our spring break. And so Easter falls the latter part of April in 2024-25. And you can see here a comparison of professional development days versus record days for each of the respective years for the traditional calendar. You will note that last year we had 8 professional development days. This year we have 9 professional development days, and there is a reason for that, and that's, of course, to afford more opportunities for our teachers for professional development and to assist them or to give them more time to have training with the LETTERS program, Learning Essentials for Teachers, for spelling and for reading and spelling. LETTERS, yes, L-E-T, yes.
Got it.
I got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that affords our teachers an opportunity to complete that training. You can see that there are still 4 record days for our teachers, and again, our students are not in school during those record days, and we have the same number of record days for 23, 24, 24, 25 as we do this year. And this is the year-round calendar, Woodcrest for 2023-24, and we're going to do this for that one too, just because. And so you can see the same color code is utilized for our year-round school. And again, this is a comparison, 2023-24 versus 2024-25, the respective report days, teacher report days, student report days, Wellness Week, winter break, spring break, last student day, and last teacher day. And like the traditional school calendar, the number of professional days went from 8 to 9. Record days remained the same. Our year-round calendar, again, there are, as this year, there will be three intercession sessions, and you can see that just because the dates change from year to year, the dates will change. So the next steps are that we will get that input from the public. You will digest the calendar, and you either have questions or comments this evening, or you can send us questions, and we will present it again at the March 21st meeting for your vote as to whether you wish to adopt the calendar. And that's it.
All right, we have some questions. We'll start with Vice President Vera and then to Dr. Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. I just wanted to point out that some of the dates on here, there seems to be a mismatch with the year. So I want to make sure that we, like just for example, Professional Development Day, March 5th, Wednesday, 2024, I believe is supposed to be 2025. because March 5th in 2024 is a Tuesday. Same with some of the dates up top. I think there just might have been an oversight between year 24 and year 25. Same thing with the spring break. It has Monday, April 1st to, go back up.
One of
Yeah.
them has April 18th
To
till
Friday,
5th.
5th, yeah. So I think there's some issues. We want to definitely make sure that these dates are correct and reflective of the right calendar year before, I mean, obviously it's already out, but it's something that I noticed in a few different sections where there are some missed dates here.
Okay.
So
We
it'd be
can-
slide 10.
Okay, we can certainly make that correction. And I do know that the dates on the calendar itself are correct. There may have been some interposing of dates on the table that was created. But the dates on the calendar are correct. They were definitely double-checked.
Thank you.
Dr. Pierce?
So in addition to the dates on the calendar, can we also make sure there's a key on how to read the calendars if they're going to be online? So particularly where we have the visuals of red blocked out dates, green blocked out dates, that we're providing a key for what those colors represent when they're
Yes.
online?
Yes, there is a key. The reason they aren't on the PowerPoint is because they wouldn't fit.
Okay,
So I read them, and there should be. I thought there was one in your, I thought there was one in your packet. They are on the calendar itself.
So I think when we're doing stuff like this, we need to make sure that all of the visuals that are given are accurate and the same, that the key is included, because, I don't know, we might end up putting this one up somewhere and then people don't have the key. So I just ask that we're consistent in the years that are there, but also the keys that are shown with the visuals. In addition to that, I have a question around the selection of breaks. So we are on the Easter schedule. Noticing that Good Friday falls on March 29th of 2024. And then the proposed break is following kind of after, our spring break is following after that. And so in that year, we're determining to take the spring break later instead of closer to Easter. So I think my question, and I've posed this in the past, is determining what the rationale is for our spring breaks and how they're following outside of even the Easter holiday, so we can give parents and families a way to think proactively in future about vacations and plans. In addition to that, on our calendar, I don't see, and we discussed this as a board, I think, in the past, other cultures and religions, and we know that these holidays are significant for them. How we can take those additional holidays and dates into account, and potentially offer all of our students the days off for those significant holidays for other cultures and religions. When we get down to the proposed calendar with professional development days and record days, I appreciate the efforts to try to keep some consistency with the week, because I know some parents, if you one week have the Wednesday off and the next week you have the Monday off, it throws off a lot of schedules. So I do want to say that I appreciate that, for example, with the professional day happening on January 16th of 2024, and then your records day happening on January 17th of 2024, just given the 2 consecutive days off as opposed to breaking those out like we've done them in the past. So thank you for doing that. If we have continued opportunities where we can continue to pair the two dates up like that, I think we should really move, if we listen to most of the feedback that we're getting from our parents, that we should move to do that. Just put the two dates together so we're not breaking up dates and weeks. Let's say, and I think the question around Easter also comes back for our intercession. 3 options for our proposed year-round calendar. Again, that spring break is kind of happening right before the Easter holiday. So again, just when we're looking at how we can help parents think more proactively about that spring break, be mindful for our year-round calendar as well. And then I would also challenge us to think about how our break calendar and calendar in general coincides with other calendars from other schools around us, right? So for example, I'll pick on OSU right now. So if OSU's break is happening at one particular time, do our breaks coincide with that? Thinking about the parents that might work there, right? Thinking about our students who might be in College Credit Plus programs there, Columbus State. Thinking about our students who might be in those programs, that are they actually getting a break? Or are they simply off from CCS one week but still in the college classroom while they're off from CCS because our calendars don't coincide? So if we could give that some thought as well, I think that would be good.
Thank you. Board Member Brown.
Just briefly, and my dear colleague touched on it already, but that is the religious holidays. For decades now, we've had published 5-year calendars of all the religions of all the various holidays, many of which are part of our community here in Columbus City Schools. And just a question to ask, and that is, how and to what extent have we factored in those calendars and those holidays?
And I can say that the working group did look at the other religious holidays, and that's a task. That's a great task simply because of the numbers.
Sure.
And I'll leave it at that.
But then my comment is, then let's not center spring break around Easter,
Thank you.
because that's not fair. I mean, everything is set up on a Christian calendar because that is historically what we've been, but we know our diversity in this district is changing. And I think just shutting it down and not being able to explore, maybe not I mean, there's a lot of beautiful holidays, but we know that we have subsets of our families and communities, and they're growing populations. And this is starting to now kind of, be an issue, I think, in some of our schools and around testing and, because they're out. They want to celebrate these wonderful, beautiful holidays. And we want them to do so. And I know we have procedures and there's policy about that and allowing them to do so, but, it might be time just to really lean into that and start to really consider, we can't in one breath say we're centering spring break around Easter and then not say we're not going to look at Eid, right? When we have populations that, are asking for that. And so let's just be mindful. We value diversity. We want to include everyone. And certainly we are a different district than we were 50 years ago in demographics and I think philosophy. And so I would strongly encourage us to continue that dialogue, even if, we have to figure out how to negotiate that with our friends and CEA and really looking at it. I would encourage us to do so.
Thank you.
Sorry for jumping in there.
No, I appreciate your expanding on the thoughts that I gave, which were fairly minimal, but I agree.
Member Beckerly.
Continuing with this topic, can I suggest that we look at the data? Because I think, I grew up downtown, close to New York City, and the public schools all had Jewish holidays off. I don't think it was because of religious diversity or celebrating it. It was because in those districts, enough people were absent, kids were absent on those days, that it made no sense to have school. And I think it used to be that enough people were absent, kids were absent on Good Friday and Holy Week, I'm old enough to remember those times, that you wouldn't go to school. So none of that, that's not, should not be the driver of focusing on Easter. I would love for us to look at the data to see if we're hitting critical mass on any of these other holidays. And I would, dare say we wouldn't hit critical mass on Good Friday even if we didn't have it off. But that's neither here nor there. I think that really what we should do is let the data of absences drive that decision. If not, absent a clear pattern that, X percent of kids are out, hence we should just shut down school. Not so much choosing one religion over another, but just the practicality of it. I would love for us to survey parents and teachers about when they need the break. Because this teacher needed a break long before a late Easter. And so I think there's some reason why other districts tend to have spring break when they have it, because it's cutting off a long stretch that tends to go from January to the end of the year. So I think there are reasons to look at spring break that have more to do with what makes sense educationally, and or to let the data of absences drive our decision-making more than when Easter is. And I'm not sure why we traditionally looked at the Easter week. I mean, it gave you an extra day because it included Good Friday, and maybe that was the whole reason, but.
Because businesses give that.
Do they anymore, though? Anyway, so
Nationwide.
that's my suggestion.
Yes, those are certain things that we can look at, and I think that we need to get away from the optics of it being around Easter. Because when you look at when the break is, April is a good point for the break when you look at the other breaks and how long the kids have been in school between breaks. But I do understand the optics of break being at Easter. I have no idea how long the break has been associated with Easter, but I don't think that's the sole factor in when the break has been established.
It might be interesting to find out why many other districts go like the second or third week in March. What drove that decision? It may be a good reason, maybe not, but it might be worth knowing because that's much more common.
Back when Ohio State was on quarters.
No, but I'm even thinking outside of Ohio. It tends to be in
I'm
March.
just saying, in a district I was in, it was, especially in Central Ohio, you geared it around Ohio State was quarters. That's when I don't know what they're doing semesters.
We're semesters
And
now.
I don't know when that break
I
is.
see what you're saying.
But
Okay.
I was at Worthington, and we had a lot of OSU folks, and so it was driven by that quarter break.
And we still have the spring break and the winter break, so we could still make it coincide. I have a question related to attendance, and I think it ties what Board Member Adair was getting at when she said we can do this differently. I think we make a huge assumption that many Christians are Christianed and churched and actually observe these holidays when they may not. They literally just have the days off. And I think some students you may find, even though they are very religious and spiritual, if you tell them they have to be at school, they'll be at school, right? And so the attendance indicator might not be the best indicator for us in this case. I agree with Board Member Adair and my colleague, Board Member Brown, that we need to think very creatively about how we acknowledge the cultures, the religions that are within our schools, and that doesn't have to be based upon who shows up on what particular day or holiday. We just need to value those and give them the dates off. We make the blind assumption for Christianity and people being churched.
I was trying to make no assumptions and just go by the data.
It's okay, yeah, you both have valid, I think you're looking at it differently, but, and, you know, it may be that it's something in a contract that's saying this, so I'm seeing head nodding in the back, so we need to maybe think about that, again, being, you know, what's our philosophy on all this now? I have a technical question around the late spring break in the 24-25. Is that due to testing? Are we pushing it back the opposite of the Good Friday or whatever? Can we not have spring break in the middle because of testing? And is that, I know that that's not something we adopt, but if I hang this thing up on my wall at home, should we include other details in the calendar of like really important district days or periods like testing weeks? So families are aware, because, I mean, you know, I print these off and hang them up. I know that's not anything we approve, but it's a helpful thing at a glance for families to look at. So there's going to be an opportunity for more public comment on this.
In the mention of public comment, how are we gathering and keeping that? Are people just on the website typing their comments in on Facebook? Like, what are we doing?
I'm leaving that to communications. I'm not sure how.
We will clarify how we are gathering feedback between this public hearing and our next meeting before we adopt the calendar, March 21st. So there will be ample opportunity to collect the feedback.
Okay. Other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, Mr. Barnes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to look at item 7.2, which just is an update from our ad hoc committees. We have two updates tonight, one from Structure of Board Work Ad Hoc Committee and the other on Board Strategy and Prioritization. I'll turn it over to Vice President Vera for update on Structure of Board Work.
Thank you, President Adair. So we are excited to announce that the survey is complete in terms of the structure of the survey. We did get just some insight from, Dr. Chapman, and we're waiting on just one final piece from James Barnes. But the survey is complete, and so we are going to be working diligently, probably by the end of this week at the latest, first thing Monday, to make sure that the survey is circulated to committee chairs, in addition to administrative support and ultimately committee members. So this is information going back to us collecting data just to evaluate our effectiveness in our committee space as it relates to our student outcomes focused governance model. So that information will be coming to your emails very soon.
Thank you. Thank you for your work and Dr. Pierce's work on the survey. Update from our Board Strategy and Prioritization Ad Hoc Committee. I'll turn it over to our co-chairs, Norma Beckerly and Cole.
Okay, I believe that, oh, no, that's not it. There's another.
You have.
Oh, there we go. No, not that one. There was the, there's a different one. Well, anyway, I can share what we were talking about. What we did was we were tasked with coming up with a way of tackling the root cause analysis. And that was as a result of our conversations on December 8th and December 20th at our board meetings. Or no, that whatever those two board meetings were in December. And so the first step that we came up with was to take all of the factors and the thoughts, because what the problem was that we had all of these prioritization, or things that we thought were driving it, like open enrollment, the 2-mile rule, do we transfer high school kids, so all of these factors, and what we'd said at the time during those conversations was that we needed to know the impact and the relative impact of these things as the first step in the process. Thanks. If you could scroll to the next one. So at the presentation that Board President Adair prepared for 1220, she listed all these things. And so our problem is that we need to quantify the impact of these factors, both on transportation and our capacity to achieve the goals while adhering to the guardrails, in order to arrive at short-term, mid-term, and long-term strategies to address our transportation issues. Because some things are short-term and some things are systemic. And that was kind of where we came up with all of that. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So we developed a series of steps to start the process of conducting root cause to address these long-term systemic policy challenges. Okay, next slide, please. And we'll send you a copy of this in final, but we just wanted to prepare this, to present this so that you could think it through or understand our thinking, and then we can decide what you all think about if this is an okay strategy to pursue. So the thought was, step one is to first determine the impact on transportation itself. And so those are a list of the factors that was identified in the 1220, and there may be others once we meet. So the process for step one would be to schedule a series of meetings with the subject matter experts to quantify these factors on transportation and identify whether there's additional factors. And we estimated 4 to 6 weeks we could probably, talk about whether that's the right time. Okay, next slide, please. And then step two would be determine the impact of these factors. So once we sort of figure out which are the high yield, high impact factors on transportation, compare those to their impact, those same measures, if we were to take them, such as, say, for example, we're not going to do this necessarily, but if one of the choices was to not transport on yellow buses high schoolers, then we would compare that to the impact on our ability to achieve the goals and the guardrails and try to come up with some way to weigh both of those things and talk about meaningfully what's the best strategy when you take both of those into account, the impacts on both. And so doing that with each one of them so we come up with sort of relative strengths and weaknesses of each potential strategy. Can you go to the next slide? And then the same would be true looking at the things that will have the highest impact on alleviating the transportation stressors, their impact on human resources, operations, risk assessment, financial, budget, because that really is another impact. So you have to kind of do a three-way assessment. And those two things could go in parallel. The impact on the academics and the goals and guardrails, and then the impact on budget, human resources, operations. And then if you can go to the last slide, then we try to take the time, either as a board or as an ad hoc committee, all of these would be the same true, to sort of tease out, based on all of that information and that data, what makes the most sense. And the thought was that that final teasing out could occur after steps 2 and 3 are completed. But as I said, we'll send you this so you can have some time to adjust it, but I just wanted to talk it through, or we just wanted to share it.
So the first step is to
Cause analysis.
yeah, to meet with the subject matter experts and get more of that information and data that we had talked about during our conversation that we needed, so that we could start the
if you could
prioritization.
Go up a few slides to step 1. The magical people behind. Yes, that would be the first step. And we would schedule meetings with subject matter experts. And then the question, do we solicit information or do we actually have board meetings that are noticed? Some of those things are the consideration. Do we generate information first and then have the meeting? So all of those details would be part and process of this, part and parcel of this first step.
Are there questions right now, or do you want to digest it?
Yes, I'm completely, let's slow walk this for me. So this is to address our discussions on transportation, right?
Yes.
Yes. And we had an ad hoc committee for transportation to work on this.
I'm not sure which committee you're talking about. Michael and I were part of the committees that were stood up in the first meeting of this year.
So I just want to
We had reports, but we didn't have.
just kind of reiterate that I think we laid out, does all of this take into account feedback from administration?
No, that's what the step one is.
Step one is to get it.
Get it.
Because we identified all these factors, but we hadn't quantified it.
We already laid that out in the last meeting.
I think it's the quantification of the impact is what we're going
So
after.
they're redoing,
So this is the start of it. Okay.
okay.
We're not redoing, we're starting with where we left off and trying to quantify it. Like, some of these things may have more of an impact than others on, what's the, I think we all agree that we don't want to do all of these things unless we know which ones make the most sense.
Vice President Vera, do you have a question?
Yeah, I think, thank you first and foremost for creating a visual because it's helpful for me to at least be able to see it. I think for me, it's about, I want us to be very clear about what we have capacity over. And this is a long list of things that I know there's a lot. And really figuring out, based on what we have said as a board, based on those 2 conversations back in December, I'm trying to understand what we talked about in December and kind of this version of that, because it's a lot a bit different. And so I'm trying to understand exactly what we said we were going to do in December. And then this sounds like a much more intricate process that I also want to be mindful, because we have to also think about what's board work and what's really student outcomes focused work. And then looking at, a schedule of series of meetings as well. Like, is there another way that we could capture that data that doesn't necessarily require meetings and things? So just that, I think I'm just thinking about it out loud. I don't really have but there's just.
I agree that we could actually ask for information, and that was if you look at the description of what this ad hoc committee was, the things that were included in it were root cause and continuing the conversations about transportation. So that trying to adhere to that framework, I think absolutely we could ask for information. And the we, I guess, at this point, and part of what I think we need to talk about, the we at this point are Board Member Cole and I. And do we get others involved? How do, at some point we'll have to have conversations, but maybe we gather the data first and then have the conversations. We could, and I think that's part of what this is triggered, this is intended to create this conversation, because it may be that we decide as a board that Michael and I go out and try to get as much information, and then we all talk about it together, or we create a committee that includes some staff and some of us. I think that's all up for discussion. But I was trying to at least get, and what I was trying to tease out in these slides is a process, and maybe we hand the whole thing over to the administration and have them come back and report it to us, but the point was, and the December meetings, we all agreed we needed to understand root cause. And so that's what we're trying to get at here.
But I think in addition to understanding root cause, and this goes back to what Board Member Vera just indicated, what do we have the capacity to take action on? And in our first step, we don't have our transportation policies up there. Where are our transportation policies? From what I recall, in December, we said that we would send those policies over to Board Member Brown and our governance and governance policy advocacy committee. And we're leaving that out again. I think the lowest hanging fruit that we have as a governance body is through our policy.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think that the thought is that if we'll know what policies need to be changed and how after we do this. Now, who the we is and how we do it, I think, is up to conversation. But we can't decide whether to change the 2-mile radius policy until we have more data, for example, or any of them. Yellow bus. So
I think you can do an assessment of the current policies that we have right now to determine if they are impacting transportation in the immediate, right now. How are these policies impacting transportation? If we want to do a root cause analysis, then yes, that can be a further timed out. But I think right now, what we hear our community saying from students, families, educators, administrators, we need to handle the transportation issues that we have in this district. So from an immediate red light, like we got an issue here, let's look and see if our policies are negatively impacting transportation.
So can I jump in? I just want to jump in. So let me read what it was that this committee, the outcome this committee was supposed to do, just so we all know. The goal is to better organize and prioritize holistic strategy in the identified categories, developing the short-term and long-term action plan for the board. This work will be done in collaboration with the district administration and must align with monitoring of the board's goals and guardrails, improving student outcomes, and performance of the required and legal tasks of the Board of Education. The purpose is the ad hoc committee is appointed to review and make recommendations to the Board of Education in furtherance of the root cause discussion held by the board during the winter of 2022. So it was a continuation of where we were. In those meetings, we were discussing a lot of things we needed, a lot of data. How could we prioritize? Now, we did say that we were going to send things over to the Policy Review Committee, which that's a separate committee. So Board Member Brown can let us know if it went over. I know we did not have a meeting, so perhaps that's what happened. And so that's an update from that committee. Remember, none of these things work in silos either. Like all of our committees are linked together. Even the structure of board work is linked to all of this. So the point of this is just to get to that prioritization of where we left off. And the slides of, we started to put that long and short term kind of list together. And we said, you know what, we can't do this by ourselves. We're going to need to engage our administration and have some discussions. That's where they are in this. So that's what they're coming back and saying, this is how we've thought through. And, they've said meetings, maybe we're saying it's not actual meetings, but we haven't done anything since then.
And I think that's when I see the time frame of 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to our families and saying, even though we have 4 public comments.
Well, let's also just be fair about what we're solving. So none of the things up here in reality help to solve the day-to-day issues. That's administrative work.
But
we are looking at the long term. We're looking at this process was to examine the holistic, longer term factors of a lot of things, equity being one of them. How do we not fix the immediate problem, but solve it for the future so it's no longer a problem? That was this exercise. Now, the day-to-day things about what they need, if we need to talk about, do they need more resources right now? Do they need more funding? Is it a policy change that needs to happen right now? These are things that is not stopped by administration bringing these things to us and asking for those things with our experts. So let's just be clear about what our work has been. It's about taking that long look to really identify these system barriers so we don't have these problems at a higher level, because we've heard that from our team, right? The policies that this board has made for various reasons are now creating an impact on the way transportation is run today. So we need to review those policies, and that's what's up there. That's all the board work. So that's where we were in that conversation. So that's what we need to continue.
Which I get and appreciate. And I think as we're having, when are the school choice fairs starting?
Now,
They've already started, and there's one tonight.
There's one tonight that whatever we decide to do related to transportation might impact how school choice is happening.
well, it won't this year.
I guess-
This is not,
I guess
this won't happen this
the priority, really, colleagues, is we have families, and we all know this, who are having transportation issues. So I implore us to think about ways that we can start to make immediate impact and change so we address the immediate, day-to-day, present transportation issues.
Yep, agree, and that's what administration brings to us that we do address. And our job is to look at it on a policy funding level so that we can solve it as a system, and that's what we're trying to work on. So it's a both. It's a both. So, but in this conversation, this is what we're talking about. So this is what's proposed. It's about continuing those more holistic conversations around these policy decisions and the impact to figure out the priority, because no, we can't do all of them. But we have to figure out where to start and which one is the best to start and make the most impact to the system as a whole. Board Member Reyes, I keep wanting to say Vice President.
I just had a question. Since you mentioned the work of prior boards, so if we're looking at moving forward, right? There's a lot of factors that impact decisions that boards make, right? Student attendance not occurring at the high school levels. What's the remedy? Because now you have to transport high school members. So I just want to make sure that as we're making, we're using our words, that future boards will say the same thing. Decisions that this board made impact future.
And remember those assumptions about the conversation, right?
But so that leaves, so one of the things that I'm noticing that we may miss is if, as we are working, we need to ensure that we have a strategy of, we have 109 buildings, right? So we've had discussions as a board. Are we now going to have, in the next 2 or 3 years, are we going to have 80 buildings, that are aligned with our student numbers and enrollment, aligned with curriculum that we have made a decision, as I see segment 4 and 5 of FMP. In order to make sure that we're successful, we need to have a strategy on what our district's going to look like. Because you say, how do we take our priority, right? So AJ called, what are the things that we want to prioritize? What's our academic curriculum going to look like? What impact is that going to have in what buildings we have, what size of town, what closes, what stays open, how do we consolidate, what staff we need? So I think somewhere needs to be a bullet on that, because I don't even think we can look at segments 4 and 5 until we know what academic is going to look like, is going to look for the district. So we've had these conversations for several years. What buildings will we be closing? What is the district going to look like? We did that whole little, move the little hotels and the houses around. So, what is the district? If we're going to be if the focus of the board eventually is going to be the district's going to have, and nobody gets scared, I'm just saying, we have, 45,000 students. We're built for 110. If a mathematician would tell you, then we cut 50%, right? That's not logical. But what is that drastic cut? So if you're closing buildings, I've been on the board, we've closed 38 buildings since I've been on the board. The strategy of 35 buildings more would be different than the strategy today of 109 buildings. So somewhere we need to add that, another bullet of, the driver should be academics and what the district's gonna look like and how are we going to educate our kids. Once that is decided, then we can look, because if you have less buildings, you don't need a 2-mile radius. If you have less buildings, open enrollment.
This is the
might have a-
exercise, Ramona.
Yeah,
This is
right.
the
But
exercise.
I'm just saying, we're missing that.
We are missing bullets because
Yeah, I
she
don't think this
summarized.
bullet is-
We
is
didn't.
final. Those
in
bullet
our-
lists is
Right,
final.
so
In-
we're having a discussion, so
I'm just,
my
she didn't put all the bullets
recommendation-
because the whole thing about also looking at the structure of the school day and the bell times, and there was a lot more on that summary sheet that we developed at the last meeting that kind of left us where we were. And so it is about doing exactly what you're doing right now, but we need them to help us.
Correct. So I was asking for an extra bullet. And the second thing is, have we done the analysis of the new busing, or is the old busing system? So we did, so that's the part as to Dr. Pierce, having those numbers. Yes, we're gonna have a lot of people speaking because we switched our system. So,
You mean, are we,
using those numbers as we talk about what do we do now.
or are you meaning
administration.
also, because it's my understanding, and I see Rodney on too, and Dr. Chapman, that the plan was to eventually get back to the system that we actually purchased, the Alpha route.
But can I also add, though, if we're forward-thinking as a board and we're looking at the root cause and long-term strategies, can I request that short-term, we receive an update from our administration on transportation issues that are brought to us? So I'm thinking about our last meeting where the mom said, there's 60 kids on this bus, right? What are we doing now that we have the routes somewhat figured out to, make sure that there are less students on the bus, that it's a good capacity on the bus, that kids aren't stuffed into the buses? The unsafe bus stops, as those are identified, can we get a report that comes back and says, hey, we identified 3 unsafe, dangerous bus stops, and we've changed those? We need some type of mechanism in the immediate, right now, that's helping us deal with the red lights that are flashing.
I love that idea. I mean, I would like to have a written report that we got as part of the weekly connection maybe that says this is an issue, this isn't an issue.
But I think the community needs to hear that report. Our community needs to know that our administration is working on it and they're making those changes. Continue to be patient with us because it's a marathon.
And I think it goes back to what President Lois Carson said, is, what is that percentage of late buses? Because we may find out, and obviously nothing, we don't want to accept late, early, buses, but, speaking truthfully of what the issue is it really red? Is it yellow? What is going on in the district? Because we may be, doing well 87% of the time. So then we look at what's that 13% that we need to look at, and what are those strategies to fix that? So that's why I was saying we moved to we went back to the old system. We've been in it for a month, a little less than a month. I'm going to make an assumption that some of those, and then the last report we got drivers filling the routes, and we've got extra drivers, which was wonderful news. So there's got to be something that's different data that we need to be looking at today. So, and I know Dr. Chapman wants to say something.
Yes, President Adair, members of the board, I would like to offer, one, I want to name that our transportation team is certainly looking at the data and looking at how to maximize the resources that we have and address the issues on a day-to-day basis. So I, too, was curious about where we are in relationship to the improvements that we have made, the transition to, or back to, Versatrans. And so I'd asked the transportation team to provide us with an update at the cabinet meeting today. So I do know that there are significant improvements that have been made, which we shared, many of which we shared at a previous board meeting, but there are still opportunity for improvement. And there will continue to be opportunity for improvement. I want us to remind everyone that we are still short drivers, right? So we are still not where we need to be with the number of drivers to fill the routes on a daily basis, given a number of different factors, right? So we can certainly, I would love to have feedback in terms of how often the board would like an update in this fashion. Certainly, we can provide an update weekly internally for internal communications, but if we would like to revisit this conversation on a monthly basis at every board meeting, I would certainly welcome that feedback, but rest assured, the team is looking at the data. We certainly will continue to aim to improve all of the feedback that we are receiving, whether it's the number of calls that we're receiving to the call center, the number of late buses that we have, the number of routes that are overcrowded, or the number of routes that are identified as unsafe. I can tell you that the team has been very responsive to responding to, looking at the data, and responding to the needs of our students, services to our schools, as well as to our community. So, but it's a work in progress. It is not perfect, and it will we'll continue to work on it and resolve those issues on an ongoing basis. But certainly welcome the opportunity. The team will be excited to share and provide updates as frequent as needed.
Let's go ahead and schedule that for
Yes,
the next
please.
meeting. We'll go ahead and do an update on operations, transportation.
Transportation.
Yeah.
Got it.
And Dr. Chapman, if I can offer up, because I think it's also confusing, because in our last board meeting, Rodney said we had more than enough drivers. And then I'm hearing that we don't have enough drivers, and you're also now saying we don't have enough drivers. So I think we need to really clarify where we're at. Is it, do we have enough drivers? Do we not have enough drivers? And is that because of call-offs? Like, what exactly is the root cause as to, do we have the drivers? Do we not have the drivers? So I think we keep going back and forth as to, we have more than enough drivers. More, so
Vice President Vera, let me clarify. So before the pandemic, we had over 700 bus drivers. We are not at that level, right? And that was the same amount of service that we were providing to our current community. We're nowhere near 700 drivers. If I'm not mistaken, we're around 500 or so, plus or few, right now. So what we've had to do, what the system had to do, was respond to the national driver shortage and make changes. We had to adjust, we had to adapt. In some cases, that mean fewer routes. We were not able to have as many routes because, again, on any day-to-day basis, you want to have more drivers than you have routes. So if there are call-offs, if there's an accident, if there's a late bus, if there is a parent that's not able to get to the bus stop and the bus is running late, we can send a sweeper bus to pick up the rest of the route and keep it moving, right? But we were at a place where we did not have a delta where there was more drivers than our routes. And so we had to adjust. We had to modify our delivery model and create fewer routes, meaning we're adding more students to routes, changing the stops, making fewer stops instead of more stops, right? The service that we were able to provide pre-pandemic is not the service that we're able to provide post-pandemic. So we're in a place right now where we have made significant adjustments. And our community certainly has been gracious in most cases in responding to those adjustments. For the first time in January, what our transportation team shared with me after we transitioned back to Versatrans is that we were in a place where we had all of our routes covered, meaning we're right there on the cusp. We would love to be in a place where we still have more drivers than those routes so we can account for when an employee is sick and not able to take their route. We're pulling supervisors from their assignments or pulling from other areas of the organization and have them cover those routes. Not an ideal situation. So we're still in a place where we still are filling in the gaps and making sure that we're able to provide service and meet the needs of our community. So we will certainly come back to you with a better understanding of what would be that sweet spot where how many drivers do we need above the number of routes that we have. And then remember, each time a family calls and says, this stop doesn't work for me, the bus is too crowded, what do? We pivot, we respond, we create a new route, we create a new stop. Is that a new driver? How do we cover those routes? So we're trying to adjust. We're trying to be responsive to the needs of our community. We're trying to be flexible, but I just want you all to know that we're still at a place where this is what it looks like post-pandemic in an era and a day and age where there's a national driver shortage. And that's a larger conversation. But certainly, we would be happy to provide an update and share where we are to date.
Board Member Beckerly.
You know, I'm connecting some dots here, and I'm thinking that, and to Dr. Pierce's point, the community needs to know this, as well as, you know, where we're doing better and worse. And I'm thinking about what President Carson said. The community also needs to know that. And I'm almost wondering if, as much as reporting to us, if we could come up with maybe two things. One is some sort of a dashboard that's almost like This Week in Transportation, this percentage on time, this percentage late, this percent, you know, this called off. And, you know, maybe some overall video where Dr. Chapman explains what you just explained in terms of at our best right now, we're not going to be at pre-pandemic service levels because of this national shortage. We're better than we were. We're getting better week by week, and these are the numbers. And maybe feature, you know, a good story about a bus driver or a happy family, and then, you know, a struggle, or, you know, like, so that there's some sort of a way to say to the community, both validate their frustration, explain the predicament so they understand it better, and elevate some of the stories that require elevating, because they're in the midst of all of this, there's still good happening. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's as much reporting to us as it is making that available to the community once or twice a month. Mm-hmm. Thought. Because I think that would address it kind of connects full circle with what President Carson was talking about earlier today.
I appreciate how you're connecting the dots, and I think to take it one step further and to connect it with the prioritization of work. So if we know that our capacity is not at Delta, and we have to, in some instances, have buses that are overcrowded, maybe we can make the commitment that we're going to ensure that all of our stops are safe. Right? What can we do given the constraints that we have? That's what our community will appreciate. I think while we can do these stories on a great bus driver and families that are having a great experience, it's the one family that's not having the great experience that we need to be focused on. Because if we can,
I think we should focus on both, definitely.
Yes. But in being transparent and sharing all of that, I think there are still some improvements and wins that we can make in the immediate to deal with these red flags or these red lights.
Okay, which is okay. I let us go down a little rabbit hole, but it was very important. It wasn't exactly a topic, but on very closely related. So I'm actually going to ask, I saw that we lost a family, which is unfortunate due to time. We will contact them and make sure that they have their voice heard because they were here to speak. And so I'm going to ask the board if we can move up, if whoever's left, I believe we have, because we still have some things on our agenda to do, but I see the time and I want to make sure that you have time to speak with us. And I know you're here to talk about transportation as well. So we're just, if you will allow it, I'm going to move into item 25, public comment, and come back to the consent agenda.
Yes.
So we're going to go ahead and I will do our in-person so the board Liaison Nichols can get the virtual people. So we'll start, if you're still here, Caitlin Jackson. Okay. The topic is busing. Board to fix the busing issue is the action requested. First, thank you, Ms. Jackson, for sticking it out with us. And you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Thank you. Hello, Columbus School Board, President Adair. My name is Caitlin Jackson. I'm with All In for Ohio Kids. Tonight, I'll be reading testimony from parents who couldn't speak tonight or make it tonight. This is from Joe Miller. My wife, Abby, and I have 3 daughters in Columbus City Schools. We drive to Centennial High School, and our youngest relies on the bus to get to Indianola, morning route 153. Since Christmas break, the route has been extremely inconsistent, sometimes arriving half an hour late, sometimes not even coming before school begins, never within the 5 minutes of the estimated arrival time the district told us. I have ended up driving her to school on multiple occasions. All of this extra waiting and driving cuts into our work days and makes for an unpredictable week. I have called the transportation hotline in the past, but it's hard to call when you've already lost part of your day. The consistency in the bus has improved in the last week with the same driver rather than different ones, but we never know. For the sake of us and other families, please fix these inconsistencies and find a better way to notify us if our bus will be delayed on a particular day. This message is from Kathleen Bates, a parent of Ames and Westgate. She notes that her child at Westgate does not take the bus, but her 7th grader at Ames does. A few weeks ago, my 7th grader came home very worried and upset because of an incident on their bus. In short, the bus driver, who was new to the route, was rearranging students due to behavioral issues when they got into a verbal altercation with a student. After arguing a few minutes, the driver made the student exit the bus. This was not at the student stop. As my child said, it was somewhere north of downtown, nowhere near any of our bus stops. My child was upset because they didn't know if their classmate got home safely. We left messages with the district office and the principal building office. We did receive a call back from the district office, but the caller did not give us a case number, so we were unable to follow up and find out what happened. In addition to this upsetting experience, there have been several issues with the activity buses. The district says it provides transportation for students who stay for after-school activities, but there have been multiple times the students at Ames have had to cancel the rehearsal for their spring musical because there was no bus available. The buses were all allotted to sports teams. There have been times that the basketball schedule change and therefore the bus availability change was not communicated to the musical director, leaving the director and the student stuck at the school until the bus returns after a basketball game, several hours after the music rehearsal had finished. No student should be stranded without transportation for hours, nor should activities be canceled because the district doesn't have enough transportation after publicizing that there would be transportation. Columbus City Schools students do not deserve to be worried that their bus will not deliver them safely and in a timely manner to school or home. If I can, I would like to insert my personal thoughts. Like President Lois Carson said, bus drivers have a lot of responsibility more than just driving, and they need support from the district. They're receiving the brunt of parents' frustrations, especially when parents aren't able to get through to call to the district. I believe that we have strong leadership in Columbus City Schools and on the board that has the potential to pull all your resources and solve this problem. The question is if you will take responsibility for this crisis or if it'll continue to be put onto the parents to deal with this mess. I ask that you work with parents in the bus union and drivers immediately to implement solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you have written testimony before you, would you give that put that on the table so that the superintendent has the information from those parents who are not here? Just want to make sure we can get in contact with them. Thank you so much. And I believe we lost Regina Prince. Oh, she's here. You were also here to speak on transportation, assist with transportation issues, and advocating to reallocate funding for transportation. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, President Adair and school board members. Like they said, my name is Regina Prince, and I have a 6th grader in this district. This is our first year using school transportation, and we have had issues since the beginning that I cannot fit within my 3 minutes given. He used to take the bus to and from school, but now only buses to home, as his new pickup time is at 6:05 a.m. To get a healthy amount of sleep, according to the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and American Association of Pediatrics, that means my son should be in the REM stage of sleep at a minimum by 8 p.m. to wake up at 5 a.m. to get ready. Because that's simply impossible by any standard, we have the luxury and privilege to drive him to school. However, please note that his new stop now drops him off directly in the yard of a registered sex offender. Luckily for us, his history doesn't include raping boys, but it does include girls, and there is a girl at my son's stop. I fear for her as she waits for the bus in the dark morning. The busing issue isn't an immediate crisis for you as you spend your mornings getting to your place of employment on time, and due to my extreme privilege, it isn't really a crisis for me either. However, I know the majority of the parents in this district don't have the same luxuries you or I do. So many have voiced their frustrations and fears with their kids walking long distances and on busy and dangerous streets with no alternative solutions. They have to go to measures like relying on complete strangers with cars taking their kids to school when the bus never shows up. Their children arrive extremely late to school and are late coming home daily for some. People have long wait lines when trying to reach the transportation department. I know I've never spoken to anyone yet. I've attempted calling many times. It's clearly not a crisis to you all. You're ignoring the messages of parents who share their kids were never picked up. You're ignoring the parents that can't locate their children and resort to calling the police to find them. You're ignoring the teachers and administrators who have to stay much past their time waiting on a bus to pick up students. What is it going to take CCS to care? Children losing class time isn't it? Children losing sleep and time with their families isn't it? Staff staying over longer than they're being paid to stay isn't it? Children having to walk across busy streets isn't it? And losing track of children's location isn't it? Not knowing the safety of specific bus stop locations isn't it? So what will it be? Abductions, assault, or even worse, another death? We've already had a child die on their walk to their stop. Maybe in your minds, 1 out of thousands isn't statistically terrible, but are you not sick to think you're pretending everything is fine could lead to another tragedy? This is your obligation to make this a priority. This is what you have been selected to do as our board, to create solutions and guide the district. Instead, it feels like the district continues to be driven into the ground. I have shared my story with you today, but there are parents who weren't able to come, and we bring their stories and voices with us. We represent over 100 parents who signed a petition to fix our transportation, demanding our board to take this matter seriously and to work with us to come for a solution. I do want to say thank you, Dr. Pierce, for your words earlier and your advocacy, and I'm hoping your colleagues will hear you. I am asking the board to prioritize finding real solutions to this transportation crisis. And I have the petition here.
Thank you. You can set it on the table. We appreciate your advocacy. Board Liaison Nichols, do you have, I'm not sure which caller you might have.
Line.
Which caller, I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry, Miss Riley.
Okay, so we have Latanya Riley, adjustment transfer process, have follow-up with the adjustment transfer process. Ms. Riley, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, I'm calling with concerns about the adjustment transfer process. As a parent, if you are finding the need to change your child's school, it would be for concern. Right now, there's a process where you fill out a document. Because I have resources, you speak with both schools. They are on board. You put the paperwork down, and then from what I understand, the transfer takes place. One of the things that takes place is once you complete the application and you submit it to the principal of the school you're attempting to remove from, you don't see the application anymore. So you don't see the principal of the school that you're attempting to remove your child from. You don't see what they stated in their portion. You receive a denial from someone who has not consulted with you as to what's the reasoning behind removing your child, and you're left to then find other resources. Every parent may not have what I have. I have resources. I'm able to afford now. I afford my child to come to school and keep being homeschooled. I had to request the copy. I was told I was denied via phone. I had to request a copy of the actual application denial, that's when I learned that the principal made false statements, which is why my child was denied. There should be a better process for a parent who is asking for other options. I can see if a school is full. I can see those things, but with me being a parent and I'm not seeing why my child was denied, I'm just told my child is denied, there has to be a better process for that. And that's where my concern is, where a process should be put in place through Columbus City Schools. As a parent is requesting a transfer, there should be a conversation from the executive, who is Ms. Lyons, with the parent if they need clarification, if they need any information, if they want to dispute what the principal said. That's not in place currently, and if it is in place, it didn't take place in my situation. And that's failing students and failing parents when they are looking for an outlet or another option. And that's all I have to say at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Riley. We'll ensure someone gets back with you from the administrative team. Thank you for coming and speaking to the board about your concern about the adjustment transfer process. Okay, we have one more speaker who is also virtual, so we will give that a minute. If we can get a hold of her, it's Kelly Howell, Transportation Bus Issues. Board action requested, reevaluate the transportation routes and length of time on the bus for students.
President Adair, the speaker's on the line.
Thank you. Ms. Howell, you have 3 minutes to address the board. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your time this evening. As stated, my name is Kelly Howell, and I actually have 2 children in Columbus City Schools. They're in elementary school at this time. And since the updated transportation model began on January 4th, my children's routes have went from 1 hour to 2 hours daily. And that's 2 hours in the morning and then 2 hours in the evening as well. So just a few updates. Last week we had no bus for 4 consecutive days. I did not receive any calls or text messages that the bus would be late. I called Transportation Daily for the bus status after we sat at the stop for about 40 minutes with no bus. And then once I was able to speak with someone at Transportation, I was just told that, they were unable to locate a bus or locate the bus, the route, and I would get a return call. So on the first day that we did get the return call, we were told that the route was an hour behind. So with that, we did have to take our children to school because we're 40 minutes from the school, so there was no way, and we're the first stop, that they would make it on time since the route was already an hour behind. So an update on day 2, when I did the same on the return call from Transportation, I was told there was no bus available to complete the route. And would I be able to just take my children to school? So obviously I took care of that. I had to take them to school on day 2. Then finally on day 3 and 4, because we were out Wednesday of that specific week, upon the return call from Transportation, I was told that a bus could be sent out to our bus stop at 8:30 a.m. And again, I told them they don't need to send it just for my kids because we're the first stop and they wouldn't get to school on time if they were leaving at 8:30 a.m. So my children are scheduled to get on the bus at 7:12 a.m. with a 9 a.m. start, so that's a little rough. And then they don't arrive home until about 5:15, 5:30 on average after they get out at 3:30. So one of the reasons I was not able to be there in person today is due to that. To be there by 6 o'clock with them getting off the bus at 5:30 just wasn't feasible for our family. Another point that I would like to bring up is just the 2 hour length of time on the bus.
I believe that is pretty extensive, from anyone age 5 to 10. I think it's a long time for, high schoolers as well. So I am sad that the route time increased. The beginning of the school year, it was a little bit better, but we did go days without bus drivers, and we were just told by our primary bus driver that there were no substitutes available, so just plan on taking them to school. If she knew she would be out, she would just let us know. So that's unfortunate because a lot of kids are missing school due to that reason. So it's my request that the school board reevaluate the routes that have been doubled and tripled on the bus drivers, as well as reevaluate the amount of time that the children are spending on the buses every day. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. We will have someone reach out to you from administration. We appreciate your advocacy on behalf of your children. Okay, we are going to, that ends the public comment. Go ahead and go back into our consent agenda. This evening, our consent agenda consists of items 9.1 to 24.2. Are there any items a board member would like to remove for separate consideration? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been a motion and a second. Are there any items board member would like to discuss? Dr. Pierce, the number?
14.1, 14.2, 14.3. These are the legislations related to WCBE.
Okay, 14.1, authority to enter into consulting agreement with the Index of Possibilities. 14.2, authority to enter into purchase service agreement with Tape Central. 14.3, board correction, authorization to continue membership in and to purchase programming for WCBE from PRX.
We've taken a number of different actions as a board to support the assessment, the evaluation, the management of WCBE. Is there any way that we can get a report, an update, a status of what's currently happening? I see us bringing in yet another consultant to kind of do this. It was my understanding that our last one was world, renowned at doing this and was a leading expert in this area. And so I'm requesting that we get more information and that we do not make this commitment in terms of financial resources for 14.1, 14.2, and 14.3. I would much rather see those dollars go to help solve our transportation issues that we heard more about today.
Thank you for those comments. Any additional comments? Any other items you'd like to discuss? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
With the exception of 14.1, 14.2, and 14.3, which I say no, yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Vice President Vera?
Also, with the exception of 14.1, 14.2, 14.3, no. Yes for the rest of it.
President Adair?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you. We are now into the executive session. Before you do that, though, I want to say thank you to your peeps at Southland. That's how they addressed it, for the kindness bags that are on our table. That was such a nice thing to walk into. So thank you to whomever put these little fun bags together for us. There's lots of little fidgets and things. I saw the board members actually playing with them during the meeting. So we really appreciate you showing us kindness today and giving us these little tokens. So thank you. I wanted to make sure that we said that. Did you have one last thing, Dr. Chapman?
Yes, this will be very quick. One, I want to remind all of our families, the calendar, when it is posted on the website, will include a link for feedback. So just want to close the loop on that tonight while we're at this table having that conversation. And also, I would like to acknowledge our high school athletes. So last weekend was the girls' championship, the championship game, at East High School, Afrocentric and Northland played. And then this weekend, on Saturday, at East High School at 12 o'clock, the boys' championship game will be at East High School. So just want to put in a plug for our high school athletes. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Very, the motion for executive session.
I move that the Board of Education recess into executive session per Section 121.22 G1 Ohio Revised Code to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of public employees, and per Section 121.22 G4 to prepare for, conduct, or review negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
And a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion, a second, please call the roll.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Vice President Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. We will now adjourn to executive session. We will come back to this room to close out our meeting, but that will not be televised. So thank you to all the staff that have joined us today. And don't forget that tomorrow is all about forgiveness, and the rest of Relationship Week we encourage you to participate in. Have lunch with somebody on Friday. Thank you, everybody.